There was no note, no slamming door, just a simple gold band. It rested beside a half-filled dish rack, caught between a coffee mug and a tarnished spoon. The kitchen light hummed. Gideon stared at the ring as if it were a venomous spider. Touching it might confirm that this wasn't some sick joke. The audiobook was still playing upstairs. Freya's favorite fantasy novel was on. A half-empty cup of tea on the dresser, smudge of lip gloss on the rim. Her tablet was gone, her satchel was gone, her sweater still hung by the door as though she didn't need it on her journey. Outside, the snow fell steadily, and the wind moaned like it was sharing secrets through the window sills. Gideon stood there for maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes. His fingers ached. His eyes were glued to that dumb, silent dish rack that never sat quite level. You'd imagine that when someone walks out, you get a last word, a shout, a struggle, a meltdown. But what Gideon got was that ring staring back at him like a mocking challenge. And the worst of it was, she'd told him earlier that evening, "I'm stepping out for a spell." That's it. No big deal. No cue that Gideon should have done anything other than nod. So Gideon did what he always did. He nodded and said, "If you step out that door, don't bother coming back. I am all in." But he didn't expect her to actually heed him. The porch light turned on by itself an hour later. That motion sensor had been faulty for half a year. Gideon grabbed the iron pipe he kept behind the stove and pulled the door wide open. The porch was bare, save for her duffel bag. The one Gideon hadn't seen in years, the one from their trip to Lake Serenity. So, either she'd come back to drop it off, or somebody else had come back to drop it for him. Gideon didn't touch it at first. The duffel bag sat right in the middle of the porch floor, zipped up and pristine as if it hadn't been collecting dust in the attic for years. The second he saw it, Gideon's heart dropped into his stomach. It wasn't just the duffel bag that unnerved him. It was its position. Dead center. Too calculated. Too rehearsed. Gideon remembers backing away slowly, trying to tell himself that maybe she'd just come back quickly, dropped it, and left. But then the porch light clicked off. Darkness swallowed everything, except the edges of the duffel bag glowing from the hallway light behind Gideon, and something about that made his whole body feel empty. Gideon turned around. The tag was still there, from their excursion to Lake Serenity 8 years prior. They had bickered all the way there, then held hands at the lake like they were kids. Gideon stood over it for what felt like an eternity. Then he unzipped it. Inside were 4 things. A satin top Gideon had never laid eyes on, soft lavender with crystal buttons, a makeup bag that didn't belong to her. It was inscribed with another person's initials, a single man's coat, definitely not his, and a photo, a real printed photo, as from a film camera. It had curled at the edges. Freya's grin in the picture was wide, wider than anything Gideon had seen from her in years. But what truly gutted him was who took the photo. Because he wasn't in it. He wasn't anywhere near it. He had never been. There. It was a coffee house, subdued, trendy, not local. Her arms were around someone taller, wearing that very coat. His face was half-turned, blurred, but it was enough to discern the closeness, the offhand intimacy, as if they'd done this a dozen times over. Gideon dropped the photo. It fluttered to the floor like it weighed nothing. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do with his hands. Gideon stood there with balled fists as if he was meant to box with a ghost, as if there was anyone left in that house to argue with. He didn't cry. He wanted to, but it was as if his body wouldn't give him the release. So Gideon did something foolish. He called her, straight to voicemail, again and again. By the 6th try, his voice wavered, not from sadness, but from something worse, humiliation. And somewhere in the background of Gideon's voicemail ranting, he swore he could hear a man's voice, not hers. A chuckle, quick, smug. She had changed her voicemail greeting. No more. "Hi, it's Freya. Leave a message." Just a generic computer recording. Gideon sat down on the chilly porch floor and stared at that duffel bag, like it might define itself if he waited long enough. And just when he was about to go back inside, his tablet lit up. Blocked number, 1 ring, 2, he answered. Silence, then a voice, quiet male, almost teasing. She advised you not to wait up, did she not? Click. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't about a disagreement. This wasn't about a marriage crumbling. This was something planned, and Gideon was the only one who hadn't known. He didn't sleep that night, not even a wink. He sat on the edge of the porch steps until the cold from the floor worked its way up into his bones. At some point, he went back into the kitchen, poured a cup of tap water, and stared at the digital clock on the coffee machine as if it owed him something. It was around then that he noticed something strange, barely noticeable, but off enough to make his breath catch. The house security system was still active. That might not sound like much, but they always deactivated it before going out. Always. It beeped loud enough to rouse the neighbors if the front door opened while it was active. So, either she never left through the front door, or someone knew how to bypass the alarm altogether. Gideon checked the front door. Locked, untouched. Then the back, still bolted. Windows, no signs of entry. He went back upstairs, half expecting to find something else missing, but everything looked just the same. The duvet pulled halfway back. Her perfume still lingered in the air. A pair of earrings on the dresser, but no Freya. Except there was something under the bed. He got down on his knees, heart beating for no logical reason. Gideon reached in, expecting dust bunnies or an old sock. Instead, he pulled out a small envelope, unmarked, heavy. Inside were 2 hotel room keys. No note, no message, just keys to somewhere he hadn't been invited. Gideon stared at them, wondering if this was meant for him to find or if someone else had meant to come back for them. He was so deep in his own head he didn't hear the footsteps at first. Faint, upstairs, right above him. Gideon froze. Every hair on his arm stood up. His heart thudded so loudly he was convinced someone or something would hear it. Gideon waited. Nothing. Then 3 slow steps again, clear this time, on the hallway floor above the kitchen. He grabbed the pipe again. His mouth was dry. His thoughts were a jumble of, what if she came back? And what if it's not her? And what if I never knew who she really was? Gideon crept toward the stairs, every step groaning beneath his weight. The light at the top was humming. The same bulb he promised her he'd replace 3 weeks prior. He hadn't, and now it felt like that dumb buzz was warning him of something he couldn't yet name. Gideon reached the top. Empty hallway. Their bedroom door open, same as before. Guest room empty. Then he heard it from inside the closet, a soft clack as of something falling or shifting. Gideon stepped forward, pipe raised chest height, reached for the door, pulled it open in one sharp motion. Nothing. Just clothes, a shoebox, a faint musty smell of cologne that didn't belong to him. Then he noticed her old tablet on the shelf. Freya hadn't used it in over a year, claimed it was broken. Gideon powered it on. No lock screen. She must have reset it. There were only 2 apps installed, a photo gallery and an encrypted messaging app Gideon didn't recognize. He opened the gallery first. Every image was recent. None of him. None of their daughter, just Freya. Freya smiling, Freya laughing, Freya on balconies, in lobbies, in bed, but never alone, always with the same man, same blurred face, same dark coats, always hiding just enough to keep his identity from him. But what caught Gideon off guard was that she wasn't just with him. She was looking at him like she used to look at him 10 years prior, the kind of look you don't fake, the kind you can't describe. And that's when Gideon realized this wasn't new. It had been going on for a while, long enough for her to feel safe enough to document it, long enough to plan her exit, and long enough to make sure Gideon found just enough to shatter without fully breaking. At least not yet. He didn't sleep again. Gideon sat in the hallway with that tablet on his lap. For hours, the blue glow washing over the walls like moonlight filtered through a dirty window. Every image he scrolled through felt like a punch he couldn't dodge. Each one just slightly more intimate than the last. No full reveals, no explicit scenes, but enough. Just enough to humiliate him in slow motion. The man never looked straight at the camera. Either she cropped his face out, or he kept his head turned just slightly. It made him feel like a phantom, and somehow that made it worse. There's something uniquely cruel about being replaced by someone whose eyes you can't even look into. Eventually, Gideon tapped the other app. The icon was sleek, black, and gold. He had never seen it before, not some standard chat messenger. That much was obvious. It opened with a passcode screen. For a second, he thought that was the end of it, but then he remembered Freya was methodical, but not always careful. He typed in the hotel room number that had been scribbled faintly on one of the key cards. The app opened. The first message at the top wasn't a greeting or a flirt. It was a location pin sent 2 nights ago, then a photo of their house, their actual house, taken from across the street at night, from inside a car. Then came the voice notes, her voice light and conspiratorial, like a teenager sneaking out of her parents' house. He's still clueless. It's kind of cute, honestly. Another one. I think he finally suspects something. He got weird about the groceries yesterday, like he noticed I wasn't buying the brand of cereal he likes anymore. Then one from him. Finally, the ghost speaks. His voice was calm, older, unbothered. Let him. Men like him don't leave. They wait around. They write letters they'll never send. And then she laughed. That laugh, the one Gideon hadn't heard in months. It wasn't just happy, it was free, careless, like he never existed. It crushed something in him he didn't even know was still intact. Gideon closed the app, sat there on the floor. His throat was raw, and his head felt like it was stuffed with broken glass. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. And it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that he had allowed this, that he'd ignored the signs, excused them, explained them away in the name of rough patches and stress. And she knew it. She counted on it. That's what made it all so calculated. When the sun started creeping through the blinds downstairs, Gideon finally got up. Not because he had a plan, not because he wanted revenge, but because he couldn't sit still anymore. He grabbed the key cards and the tablet and walked out to his car. No, just rage and questions. And as he backed out of the driveway, something caught his eye. Movement from the neighbor's window. Mrs. Camden, right? Their sweet 80-year-old neighbor, always waving, always smiling, but not this time. This time, she was standing completely still at the window, pale, blank-faced, and in her hand she was holding his wife's satchel, the one that had vanished when she did. Gideon didn't drive off. His hand stayed locked on the gear shift. His foot hovered over the brake, eyes glued to that window as if he was watching a stranger through glass. Only it wasn't a stranger. It was Mrs. Camden, and in her hand was definitely Freya's satchel. The tan leather one he gave her for their 10th anniversary. She had hated it, said it was too stiff, but she wore it anyway, out of politeness, he thought. And now here it was, dangling limply from the fingers of the sweet old woman next door, as if it belonged to her all along. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even blink. She just stood there holding it, and then slowly, so slowly, it slipped from her grip and disappeared behind the curtain. Something inside him shifted. Then a quiet kind of panic that didn't look like fear at first. It was too calm, too cold, like his body knew something long before his brain would catch up. Gideon got out of the car, walked barefoot across their perfectly trimmed lawn, stepped over the shallow hedge between the driveways, and knocked on her door. Nothing. He knocked again, harder. Footsteps shuffled inside. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Her face peeked through, fragile, tired, but still carrying that eerie calm. "Morning, Gideon," she said, as if nothing was off, as if he hadn't just seen her cradle his wife's satchel, as if it was a borrowed handbag. "Mrs. Camden," Gideon replied, careful even. "Did Freya leave something here?" She looked past him for a moment, as if scanning the street. Then her voice dropped, almost as if she was afraid of being overheard. "She said to keep it safe. She told me if anything happened, if you came asking, I should give this to you." And then, without waiting for permission, she handed him a thick white envelope from the hallway table. It had his name written on the front, his full name, in Freya's handwriting. Inside were two things. First, a flash drive. Second, a letter, not a long one, just 6 lines. "Gideon, if you're reading this, it means I did what you warned me not to. I'm not sorry. I needed out, and I took the only exit that made sense. You'll understand soon. Don't follow me." No signature, no explanation, no date. Gideon looked up at Mrs. Camden, but she was already closing the door. "That's all she left," she said gently. "I don't know where she went. I didn't ask." The door latched softly. Silence. He walked back to his house like a sleepwalker. Everything around him looked the same, but none of it felt real anymore. The driveway, the porch, the door, the hallway, they all felt like set pieces on a stage he didn't know he'd been performing on. Back inside, he plugged the flash drive into his laptop, hands shaking. It loaded automatically. One folder, no name. Inside were 3 video files. The first one was just Freya sitting in a hotel room he didn't recognize, looking straight into the camera. "Gideon," she said, "you were right about the door, and I opened it anyway, but not for the reason you think." She paused, looked away, then added, "I hope when you find this, you'll finally stop blaming yourself." The video cut out. The second one was worse. Security footage from inside a parking garage. Freya and the man, her phantom, arguing near a black car. He looked tense, aggressive. Then something changed in the tension. She backed away. He advanced. The timestamp flickered, and then suddenly the video glitched. When it returned, the car was gone. So was she. He stood alone, motionless, staring up at the camera for a full 20 seconds. Then he smiled. The third video, just a black screen with a voiceover. Freya's again. "I thought this was going to be about love, about escaping something broken, but now I know I was a passenger in someone else's plan." Click. End. Nonsense. No next steps, just silence and a line from the letter echoing louder than ever. "I took the only exit that made sense." And for the first time since this started, he didn't want to know what she meant, but he knew he didn't have a choice. He didn't touch the flash drive again, didn't rewind, didn't play it back. He couldn't. His mind kept replaying that final voiceover, her words echoing in a tone that wasn't quite fear, wasn't quite guilt, but something between resignation and dread. A passenger in someone else's plan. That stuck with him more than anything, because if she wasn't the one behind all this, who was? He didn't even realize he'd been pacing the living room until he noticed the sun had shifted across the floor, and the shadows from the window blinds were climbing the couch like a slow leak of darkness. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't changed clothes. He was still barefoot, still gripping that envelope as if it had weight beyond paper. That's when he remembered the one place in the house he hadn't checked. The basement. Freya hated the basement. Or so he thought. She used to joke that it smelled like wet secrets, but sometime last year she started locking the door. He never asked why. He assumed it was to keep rodents out, or because she was hiding holiday gifts again. The truth is, he didn't ask because he didn't want to know. But now he had to. He found the keys buried in the junk drawer, beneath batteries, broken pens, and old receipts from restaurants they used to pretend they liked. The basement door was stiff, swollen from months of humidity. When it finally gave, it groaned open as if something was waking up down there. He flicked the light switch and the single bulb at the bottom hummed to life. It wasn't what he expected. There were no spiders, no dust, no old paint cans or forgotten storage bins. Instead, there were folding chairs, 4 of them, arranged in a circle, and in the center a table, small, round, metal. On it, a stack of printed photographs, not of Freya, not of him, but of strangers, couples, women, men, some candid, some clearly taken from a distance. A few were circled in red marker. Beside the Stack, there was a thick manila folder. Inside were detailed notes, printed emails, screenshots, maps, timelines, and Freya's handwriting again, sharp, slanted. Target married 9 years, already showing signs of detachment, suspect grooming, potential leverage, financial dependency. His chest tightened. He flipped page after page. Every couple was documented like case files, behavior patterns, surveillance times, known addresses. Some of the notes were marked completed, others pending. And then he found a file with their names on it. Gideon Gray plus Freya. Inside was a log of their habits, his morning routine, the grocery store he stopped at every Thursday, the brand of coffee he drank, the hours he spent working, Freya's therapy appointments, the dates he thought she was visiting her sister, except her sister moved out of state 3 years prior. There was one photo in that folder he hadn't seen before, him sitting alone on a bench outside their local library, holding his tablet. The date printed in the corner was from 5 weeks prior. Freya hadn't been in town that day. She had said she was out of state for a work conference. There was no way she could have taken that photo herself, which meant someone else was following him, and she knew it. Or worse, she arranged it. But why? Why document their own life like a case study? Why act as if she was preparing evidence against him? Gideon stepped back from the table. His legs shook. The entire basement suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, and then he noticed something else. The fourth chair in the circle, the one directly across from the stairs, had scuff marks underneath it, as if it had been dragged toward the shadows along the wall. He followed the marks to the far side, where the concrete had a long, jagged crack splitting through the floor. Beside the crack was something small, black, a recording device, the power button still blinking, still active. He picked it up, hit rewind, and pressed play. At first, silence, then her voice again, but this time it wasn't for him. He's losing track of time. That's when it starts. That's when they become unstable, just like the others. Then the same man's voice, low and steady. You're doing great. Just a few more days. He'll either walk away or we finish it for him. His hand started to tremble. He wasn't losing her, he was being erased. He didn't go back upstairs, not for hours. He sat on the basement floor, knees up, recorder in his hand, that phrase repeating in his head like a curse. He'll either walk away or we finish it for him. Finish what? He whispered to no one. The walls didn't answer. The ceiling didn't creak. Even the hum of the basement light had stopped, burned out or just exhausted from watching too much. The only sound was his own breath, ragged and uneven. By the time he climbed back into the kitchen, it was dark out. The fridge light flickered when he opened it and realized he hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. But food felt foreign, mechanical. He couldn't chew with everything inside him clenched like a coiled wire. Instead, he sat at the table and stared at the hotel key card Freya had left in the satchel. He turned it over. No hotel name, no address, just a number, 317. And on the back, in faint ink, almost worn to a smudge, check in after 10, don't knock twice. What kind of hotel even wrote something like that? It was a 20-minute drive. He didn't take the highway. He went slow, back roads, engine humming beneath him, as if it knew he wasn't coming back the same. The building was just off an industrial stretch near the rail yard, old red bricks, flickering green neon letters that spelled out the Birchwood, in half of them dead. The parking lot was cracked and mostly empty, just 2 cars, a silver SUV and a black sedan with tinted windows he recognized from Freya's video. He pulled in, left his lights off. The lobby was abandoned. No front desk clerk, just a laminated note taped to a cracked plexiglass window. Late check-ins, room 317, leave key in drop box upon exit. No names, no signatures, no security cameras. He took the stairs. Every step groaned under his weight. The hallway on the 3rd floor smelled like bleach and mothballs, a mix that made his eyes sting. Room 317 was at the far end. The light above it flickered once and held steady. He stood outside that door, heart pounding so hard it shook his ribs. His fingers hovered over the handle. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He just slid the card through the lock. It clicked. The door swung open. No one was inside, but the room wasn't empty. There were candles, burned down to wax puddles. A laptop on the bed, open and still glowing. A projector screen hung from the wall, blank but humming, and on the table, directly in the center, was a file folder marked Gideon Finalization, Phase 3. He opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of him from the last 3 weeks, sitting in traffic, leaving the pharmacy, talking to their daughter outside her school, always alone, always distant. Then a second folder, Freya, smiling, laughing, leaving buildings he'd never seen before, holding hands with the man from the earlier footage, but now his face wasn't obscured. It was clear. He looked familiar, unsettlingly so, like someone he'd seen in dreams he couldn't remember. He flipped to the final page. It was a transcript, Freya's voice, transcribed word for word. He's been easy to manipulate. Guilty people usually are. They want to believe they deserve it. Gideon doesn't need a push, just the illusion of choice. Then the man's voice. Let's finish the script. Let him think he figured it out. That's the cleanest way. No blood, no noise, just silence. And her final words in the transcript. Good, because when he finds room 317, I want him to think this is the end. The room began to feel smaller, as if the walls were inching inward, as if something unseen was watching from the corners. He turned off the projector, grabbed the laptop, and started for the door, but it slammed shut before he reached it, and from behind it, a voice he hadn't heard in person since this all began said calmly, "Gideon, you weren't supposed to come here alone." The voice was steady, deep, calm. He turned slowly. He was already inside the room, as if he'd been there the whole time, hidden in shadow, or just waiting for the right moment. The same man from the videos, the one always blurred, always faceless, now unmistakably real. He didn't look how he imagined, no suit, no swag, just a plain jacket, dark eyes, a face that carried the weight of someone who knew too much and had long stopped caring. "Who are you?" Gideon asked, his voice quieter than he intended. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned to the chair near the table. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "You were never the target. You were the variable." He didn't sit. He couldn't. "Where's Freya?" "She left," he said simply. "On her own terms. On terms. That's all I can tell you." "No, that's not all," Gideon snapped. "You manipulated her. You watched me. You recorded my daughter. You called my phone." "What?" He exhaled, as if he was tired of explaining things to people who were already too broken to understand. "We collect patterns, people in spiraling relationships, high-risk emotional isolation. You were part of a larger behavioral study. Freya volunteered. You were monitored, documented." Gideon blinked, confused. "A study," he said, "privately funded. She agreed to participate in exchange for a severance package, relocation, a clean break." "You mean she got paid to break my heart?" He looked him dead in the eye. "She got paid to survive it." That landed harder than he expected. Gideon staggered back, as if he'd shoved him. His hands gripped the edge of the dresser to steady himself. "So, this was never about love, never about marriage." "On the contrary," he said, "it was about how love ends, cleanly, safely, without violence, without lawyers, without children in the crossfire." Gideon stared at him, his mind racing with images he didn't know how to categorize. He thought of the video in the parking garage, the transcripts, the voice recorder, the fake fights, the carefully placed clues that felt real but were never designed to hurt, only to nudge. "Freya wanted to vanish," he continued, "but she didn't want to destroy you to do it. That's why she left everything behind, why she gave you the tools to understand, even if it took you months to decode them." Gideon looked at the folder again, at the word finalization. Then he asked the one thing he had no right to. Is she happy? He paused for the first time. I believe she's trying to be. That was it. No lies, no promises, just something real in a room full of manipulation. He handed Gideon an envelope. There's no forwarding address, but there's closure, if you want it. Inside, a plane ticket, one way, not in her name, in mine, to Lake Serenity, the place where you once tried to fix things, where everything began to end. There's a cabin under your name, he said. She left the key at the front desk 2 days ago. Whether you go or not is your decision. He left the room after that, quietly, no threats, no warnings, just a soft click of the door behind him, and Gideon stood there alone for a long time, trying to decide whether to burn it all down or follow the thread to whatever came next. That was 4 months prior. He's writing this now from that cabin in Lake Serenity. It's quiet here. The lake hasn't changed. The air feels cleaner. He never saw her again, but on the second morning there was a note tucked under the woodpile. Just one sentence. You were the only part that didn't need scripting. And for the first time in years, he believed it. He walks every morning. He cooks. He writes in a notebook. He used to be too afraid to open. He even fixed the old canoe on the shore. He still doesn't have all the answers, but he has peace. And after everything, honestly, that's enough.